the church was invented because it had to be invented to maintain the international trade in the Mediterranean in roughly 14th century. So who we know as Moses right now is actually Maimonides. And he is probably the person responsible for inventing the Ten Commandments that everyone appreciated. So the trade flourished. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video I want to give you, well, I plan to call it the brief history of the church, even though, like, when I wrote my notes, I figured out that I'm not even talking about the church all that much. But still, it's some things that are needed to be discussed, so I kind of wanted to make this video anyway. A couple of disclaimers / notes at the very beginning. So first of all, this kind of knowledge is very destructive, so I'm kind of hesitant to even share it. And again, it's going to be very personal, just like my video, you know, how the elite controls you. A very recent one. I'm going to link it in the description because this video goes on the very same rails. Basically, the moral of the story, if you wish, is that, well, things you are fighting for are mostly fictional, okay? So I sort of anticipate that this video that you're watching right now will kind of, you know, make a lot of people upset, at least potentially, okay? But this is not my goal, once again. My goal here is to just document my own opinion right now. And I emphasize these words, my own opinion. And right now. So maybe in 2 months, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 20 years, even though I don't expect to live that long, my opinion would change. But still, this is my opinion right now, so I kind of want to document it. So in case you want to be along for the ride, let's go, okay? That's one disclaimer. The second disclaimer is that already closer to the topic, we're talking about history, okay? So think about the politician you hate the most. Or at least, you know, the public figure. Like you might think about Trump or Biden or Kim Jong-un or Putin or whatever. And think about, like, what if they've had infinite amounts of power in terms of information and propaganda? Like, for example, we're in 16th century, just imagine that, and this person has the same amount of power as today, but there is no internet, there is no TV, no radio, no telegraph, no periodic print, etc., etc. And 90% of people cannot even read, let alone write, okay? Just imagine how much of a distortion of reality they would bring. I mean, this politician that you're thinking about. Huh? Okay, so this is kind of bringing us closer to the idea that history is probably fake, mostly, okay? So this would be sort of the boot in the door that I'm kind of gonna use to give you my narrative. By the way, which is not entirely my narrative. Like, a lot of it I took from Alexander Tamansky, to whom I'm very grateful. Like, he made me aware of many things that I wasn't aware of, at least. So I'm gonna link a book of his. Maybe I'll show you a screenshot of it. The book obviously is about a new chronology type of narrative, which is what we're going to be discussing. But these disclaimers are finished now, so I will be kind of speaking freely right now, so I'm not going to try to prove to you anything. Like, again, I'm just expressing my opinion. I'm giving you my version of events, okay? But in a very broad strokes, again, one more disclaimer, 2.5 disclaimers, I guess, because again, like you can't really make it, like, I don't know how long this video would be, like 1 hour video about history, you know, and talk about everything right away. So, I don't know. Very broad strokes, and again, I was intending to talk about the church, but probably we're not going to be talking about the church a whole lot, but a little bit at the very least, okay? So, to start off, we're actually gonna be talking about the church. So, a general canvas, once again, imagine we are in the year 1300, or about so. Like, again, it's very hard to tell. given the state of our chronology right now, but still, civilization, again, watch my video about New York, where I discussed this hypothesis of Shkurin, how civilization develops, etc. And we're, by the way, one more disclaimer, we're going to be mostly talking about Mediterranean, because this is the home of the modern civilization, okay? If you're interested in India or China or whatever other civilization, like, it's up to you to do the research. We're talking about the modern civilization which started in Mediterranean, okay? So it's about the year 1300s, AD, you know, in thick air quotes, current chronology, maybe we should call it. So civilization is slowly getting traction in the Mediterranean. So some cities are founding colonies and becoming cities because of this. Again, see the Shkurin's hypothesis. I'm going to link it all in the description. And we get like a bigger network of cities, let's say, connected with trade, right? Connected by trade in the Mediterranean again. So once again, or rather, once such big network is formed, like, the quantity sort of evolves into quality, right? Sort of almost a global, at least on the scale of Mediterranean, network is formed, okay, of these trading cities. So now you are facing a problem that you kind of need to have some unification of rules, if you know what I mean. Like, let's say you have a contract with a guy in a city like 3 days of sailing away from you, right? How can you be sure he wouldn't trick you, for example, right? It's questions like these that kind of bring the necessity of something like a church, some organization that would control these things, at least in a moralistic sense, or maybe perhaps in a practical sense, like they would punish people who transgress these sort of arrangements, okay? So there comes a guy named Moses. We all know him as Moses in the current religious doctrine, but I would argue that the only guy I know of who qualifies to be the Moses of the Old Testament is called Maimonides. I'm probably going to show you a screenshot of a wiki page about him right now, and I'm going to link it in the description as well, so you may read about him. I'm pretty sure you may never heard about him. But if you read the story, even on wiki, about how his name came about, you would say, wait a minute, this is the Moses, no? And I think so. I think this is the Moses. I mean, he's probably wrongly dated again, etc., etc., etc. It could have been 1400s, not 1300, not 12, or whatever is written there. But I think, again, he's the guy who invented the monotheism, again, which is basically the bunch of tales about, you know, the God, which would later on be codified in what we currently know as the Old Testament. Okay, so he was the Moses. As he is described in the Old Testament. I mean, minus all the legends about him, okay? So, and here we remember, you know, this famous quote from Voltaire, which I, unfortunately don't know in English, at least not precisely. Like, the idea was that if there was no God, it would be fruitful, it would be worthwhile to invent the God, you know? So, this is exactly the situation. So we have this network of trading cities, but they are kind of unsure of each other, you know? Like, every city has maybe some local gods that say do XYZ, and the others say do alpha, beta, gamma, and like, how do you maintain this system? Well, you have to have some sort of unifying principle. And probably Maimonides, aka Moses, invented this system. Where he lived, I don't know. Could have been Africa, like somewhere Tunisia, like Spain, like, I don't know. Egypt. Again, there are legends, I guess, about Egypt, Middle East, Turkey, I don't know, like, your guess is as good as mine, but the idea is he invented this stuff, okay? Or at least, I mean, supposedly, again. According to the legend, he invented the stuff which was worthwhile to be invented, according to Voltaire, okay? So there was this major socio-economical challenge, like how to keep the civilization from falling apart. how to keep the trade going, so people wouldn't trick each other, like go wage war against each other, at least the kind of war that would ruin everything, you know, sort of the atomic war of that level on the level of 14th century or whatever. So 10 Commandments, that's how. So you install this system for everyone, and you say, okay, let's just arrange the set of rules that we all follow, and then it's all gonna be okay, right? So that was the idea. So in 1300s and early 1400s, the church is founded. The church based on 10 Commandments. Now you might ask, well, which church is that? Like, I've never heard about this kind of church. Well, it's Catholic Church. What does Catholic means? It means universal. It's exactly what it was, right? It was universal for everyone in the Mediterranean, for everyone to follow of these people trading to each other. That was the idea. And many gods that people have had locally is absolutely fine in this respect, as long as they don't disrupt the 10 Commandments. You know, don't steal, don't lie, etc., etc. Don't kill, right? The guy appears to your city, he wants to trade, you don't kill him, you don't steal from him. You trade with him, right? It's okay. You don't take his wife, if she's along for the ride, you know. Like, you treat him okay. And that's okay. And then you can cherish your Aphrodite or Bacchus or Jupiter or whatever. It's all fine. Yeah. The Catholic Church was only needed to, again, not facilitate, maintain is the word here. The trade, the civilization of Mediterranean, which is, again, for the sake of this discussion, is the civilization, because that's where the modern day civilization comes from, okay? So yeah, with all the properties that Shkurin describes, by the way. Again, watch my video about New York, where I describe his theory in more detail. So yeah, so Catholic Church at that time, at the time of its foundation, roughly in 1300s, and we're not going backwards into the past, because, again, there's no vision, like nothing is visible, but back then. 1300s is already a land of myth and fairy tales. Like what I'm talking to you, like what I'm communicating to you right now is pure hypothesis, essentially. So yeah, of course, the historians will tell you, no, we know the history up to like 15 billion years before Christ. But okay, thankfully I'm not a historian in this respect. Anyway, yeah, so the church made sure that the commandments are observed, so in the general population at the very least, so the society does not collapse and the trade is fine and the civilization is fine, all right? It is well maintained. And initially there were 5 patriarchies in the church, namely the Roman, centered in Rome, I mean, the Antioch, Alexandria, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. Unfortunately, in this video, I'm not going to be talking about Jerusalem a whole lot, even though I could have. Where it was, spoiler alert, it wasn't where you think it is, like where it is, period, right now. Period right now, actually. Anyway, so again, let me list them again. Rome, Antioch, Alexandria, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. It's all Eastern Mediterranean, right? With the exception of Rome. Rome is the exception, which is curious, right? It's very to the west. Suspiciously. It's an outlier, which I think, like again, if you read even the articles about this pentarchy, as they called it, pentarchy of the church, these 5 patriarchies, 5 centers of the Catholic Church, you would encounter some interesting ideas how, like, more centers have been added later, like some shady stuff going on. So the fact that Rome is an outlier kind of makes you think that the power kind of shifted geographically to the west as time went on, okay? So maybe the center of the civilization was at the very east edge of the Mediterranean, and specifically, we're going to be talking about this later, Constantinople being the biggest city, which is arguably the eastern part of Mediterranean, okay? Anyway, what made Rome great was the question I've asked in this video about New York and logistical theory of civilization, right? And I want to reiterate it right now, except now I'll give you an answer that I've promised, right? So it was alums, So a little comment. Justification for why we're talking about Rome is this observation that Rome is an outlier with regards to 4 other patriarchies, right, of the church. Okay, so why Rome, okay, is the question. So what made Rome great? That's what made us return to this question. So Alums in Tolfa. So Tolfa is a small commune about 50 kilometers to northwest of Rome, right? But the deposit of alums there is the biggest in the world. And what are alums? It's one of the most important materials for production of textile dyes and also gunpowder, right? And remember, we're in 1400s. It's not the mythical Rome of like 500 BC or whatever, right? Okay, so the popes of Roman, maybe air quotes or quotation marks at the very least are justified here, resided in Siena before that. Siena is right now a very small, maybe not very, but a small city near Florence, roughly speaking, in Tuscany. And by the way, I could have made another like 5-minute digression into what Tuscany is and how much of a scam it is, this name, I mean. Up until 1700s, Tuscany was called Etruria. You've probably heard about Etruscans. So Tuscany is Etruscany, basically, okay? An official title of Dukes of Tuscany was actually like Magnus Dux Etruriae, up into 1700s. So the history as it's being taught is bullshit. I'm sorry. I mean, if you can't even reproduce the proper names, please go away. I could have sworn here, but I wouldn't. Okay. Yeah. No digressions of this sort, unfortunately. But yeah. So big alum deposit is found near Rome, 50 kilometers to the northwest. And obviously Rome sits at the mouth of Tevere. At the very mouth there's Ostia, which literally means the mouth, right? Of the river Tevere, the Tiber, I mean. But Rome is on the hills, so it's easier to defend. So that's why Rome sort of accumulates more power than Ostia, for example, right? Anyways, the popes resided in Siena once again, before the discovery, which happened in 1461, by the way. So, roughly, 560 years ago. So, right after this discovery, the Pope back then, Pius II, has right away moved the papacy from Siena to Rome. Okay? And they even took the Capitoline, in quotation marks, wolf. If you don't know that, I'm pretty sure you don't. Wolf, specifically this wolf feeding to little guys, was the symbol of Siena before the papacy moved to Rome from Siena in 1461. So they took literally the symbol of the city, they took with them. Pius II, and all the anteceding popes, all the later popes after him, preserved the symbol. Because before that, the symbol of Rome was the elephant, actually. Interestingly, right? Anyway, we'll return to elephants sometime later when we discuss who Caesar was. Anyway, let's talk about this guy, Pius II, a little bit. Again, it's not going to be a whole lot about the church, but it's all related. So let's talk about this. So the legend says that Aeneas, right, was the legendary hero of Troy who moved from Troy, so roughly Western Turkey, into Italy, and his descendants founded Rome. Okay? Well, again, a brief intermission about Troy. It's a myth, it's a legend that Troy was discovered in 19th century by Schliemann or whatever. You can take pretty much any map from 16th century or about so. I'm gonna probably show you some screenshots right now, and you'd see either Troy or Ilium, which is the same name basically, there, okay? So it's a lie. The Troy was never lost. Everybody knew where Troy was back then in 15th, 16th centuries, okay? So yeah, people knew that Troy is the region of Constantinople. It's the not legion, although appropriate actually, the region of the Straits, right? The Bosphorus and Dardanelles. So yeah, even though actually Troy is on the opposite side with respect to Constantinople of the Straits, I mean, and slightly like, I don't know, maybe like 70 kilometers removed, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's the same region anyway. So, for the sake of this discussion, Troy is Constantinople, okay? And it is the greatest city because look at where it's located, okay? And remember Shkurin's logistical theory, okay? Like it's literally the meeting place of pretty much everything, you know, between Europe and Asia, between North and South, like it's the gateway, okay? And we'll return to this gateway issue slightly later. Let's return to Aeneas for now. So Aeneas fled from Troy, and Pius II moved papacy from Siena to Rome, okay? Aeneas fled from Troy to Rome, okay? And what was Pius II real name? I mean, Pius is really the church's name, right? It was Aeneas. Actually, Aeneas Silvius Bartholomeus. That's his real name. So he moved the papacy from Siena to Rome in 1461 and immediately took over the alum business. Just when the alums were discovered, like he immediately caught the wind, went there, moved the wolf. I wanted to swear again, but I wouldn't. And that's how Rome became great. So yes, the legends are true. Aeneas have founded Rome, just not in the way we think about it, okay? It wasn't the Aeneas from Troy. It was Pius II, aka Aeneas, from Constantinople, you know, or from Siena. I mean, probably he actually went to Siena from Constantinople. Because he held a lot of grudge over Constantinople, guys, but we'll return to this later, slightly later. So yeah, immediately after the papacy is moved to Rome, I mean, before that, Rome was a pretty small city, actually, a very regular Italian city. And by Italian, I don't mean in the modern sense of word, just, you know, on the peninsula, let's put it this way. So, immediately after that, the city begins to flourish. All kinds of buildings are starting to be built. And here I wanted to make another Etruscan style of intermission about bricks, but I wouldn't because I don't have the time, unfortunately. Like it would take quite a while to discuss this. But notice how the absolute majority of the biggest ancient Roman buildings, ancient Roman, you know, in quotation marks, are made of bricks. And these standardized bricks, you know, of the modern size where you can put one with just one hand, they only appear in 15th century. So, go figure. I mean, look at the Sforza Castle in Milano. Or look at Moscow Kremlin, which was built by architects of Sforza Castle, by Italian architects, essentially. And you see the same bricks in Rome. In Colosseum, in Pantheon, blah, 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 blah. So it's all contemporary to the Sforza Castle. It's 1400s, okay? So yeah, that's one big confirmation to what I'm talking about. Again, I've said to you, I'm not going to even try to prove anything to you, but if you want some corollary evidence, there you go, the bricks, okay? Wherever you see the red bricks of roughly this size, because previously, like, there were, like, these flat bricks. That's roughly 1300s, okay? But these super standardized, like, thick bricks, it's 1400s. In fact, late 1400s, because you need to have a pretty good furnaces to make these bricks, okay? Anyway, another corollary evidence is that Vatican Library was only founded in the year, I think, I'm quoting by memory, by heart, is 1475. So it would make sense if the popes only moved to Rome in the first place in 1461 to make the library some years after, like, for example, 1475, as it factually happened, right? Because think about this. If supposedly papacy was in Rome for at least 1,000 years before that, How come did they not have a library? Like, supposedly they were Christian. No, they actually weren't. Again, in case it's not clear yet, we're talking about the Catholic Church, which is the universal church, which is the Church of the Mediterranean, or if you wish, the Church of the Old Testament, even though by that time the Old Testament wasn't written yet. But it's the Church of 10 Commandments, let's put it this way, okay? So the Pope from 1461 is not Christian at all. Christianity does not exist yet, okay? Hopefully, we're clear now. So, yeah. But supposedly, I mean, Christianity was around for like almost 1500 years at this point. So, supposedly, Christianity is based on a book, right? It's literally called the book, Bible, right? It literally means the book. And how come you did never have a library there for 1500 years if your whole thing is based on a book? Huh? Huh? Excuse me? Does this make any sense? It probably doesn't, right? Okay, so we are realistically, again, we're returning to my narrative, in 15th century, so Christianity does not exist yet. Catholic Church is basically the Church of the Old Testament, and its main job is to maintain the international trade. Again, look at my previous video about the witches, not the previous, but the one before that, where we talked about how the church managed the money supply, for example, right? The church was the main bank, it was the main police, aka, you know, like secret services, like engineers, like Franciscan order, like they did everything pretty much, right? Because there was nothing else. Like the government did not exist because there were no countries. Nothing existed except for the church. This basically only system of governance, okay? Only technology of governance. The only common thing all of these people had between each other, it was the church, right? So it would make sense for any institution that managed anything to be under the supervision of the church, right? So that's what happened actually, right? Again, it was the Catholic Church in the sense it was universal, but it wasn't Christian. Christianity was not invented yet, okay? I once again emphasize that. And spiritually, by the way, there was an unlimited amount, pretty much, of all kinds of polytheistic cults of various sorts everywhere, right? So, Catholic Church was very friendly. Not friendly, maybe, you know, like, it wasn't legal, but it was decriminalized, you know, to have other gods. I know that some of the commandments say you shouldn't have other gods, blah, 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 you shouldn't make idols, but it was kind of okay, you know. The main commandments were don't steal, don't kill, and don't, you know, have fun with your friend's wife, basically. These were, and don't lie, by the way, okay, these were the four main ones. Don't make idols, it's kind of okay, you know, like, do we really care? We really don't, okay. As long as you cherish, observe the contract, it's everything fine. So yeah, let's return to Pius II, right? So look at his coat of arms. I'm going to show it to you on screen right now. What about these crescents, huh? Islam? Question mark? No, unfortunately. It's 15th century. Again, Islam does not exist yet. So crescent is the symbol of Constantinople. Again, the biggest city, the biggest trade center of the time. One of the seats of the 5 patriarchs of the church, you know, the Church of the Old Testament, aka Catholic Church. The most powerful, actually, of all the cities at the time, at the very least. So, why? Why were the crescents, or a crescent, singular, actually more like crescents plural, but at least some crescent is a symbol of Constantinople? Well, what Constantinople is famous for? Again, trade. Right? The biggest building, the Grand Bazaar. Actually, there was other building just as great, if not greater, which was the harem of King Solomon, aka Suleiman the Magnificent, but I'm not going to talk about it in this video. Maybe I'll remember it, I'll probably forget when we're going to be talking about Judaism at the very end of this video, but I'll probably forget. Just let me, like, while I remember it, okay, let me say that. So King David of the Old Testament is Selim Yavuz of the Ottoman Empire, in quotation marks. I'm gonna discuss Ottoman Empire a little bit later. And King Solomon is Suleiman the Magnificent, the son of Selim Yavuz. Yavuz is David, okay? And Suleiman is Solomon. So there you go. And Solomon had what? 700 wives? So did Suleiman the Magnificent. Thus, he needed a big building to hold them, in place. And all the, servants and the guards. So that would be 1,000+ people at the very least, right? So that requires a couple of blocks in the city. And indeed, the harem was one of the biggest buildings, if not the biggest, in Constantinople. So yeah. But that was an intermission. Let's continue with Constantinople. So the Grand Bazaar. So, the church manages, as we've just discussed previously, the moral side of the trade, right? So that people wouldn't trick each other, people wouldn't kill each other, people wouldn't, do, objectively bad stuff, honestly, in this sense. So, but how do we manage the practical side, right? So, we are trading, so, but you arrived from God knows where, and, how do we trade? What's the measure of this thing you're selling me, right? We need a system of measures, obviously. And what is the first system of measures? International ones? It's a troy system. Why is it called a troy system? Like you probably heard about the troy ounce, right? Wonder why it's called that. Well, it's because of Troy, literally. It's aka Constantinople, this area of the straits, it's as clear as day, right? Because it was the biggest trade center of the 15th century. There was this term for the elite. I'm choosing the words right now, and I don't know. Elite of this place, elite of Constantinople, I guess, okay? It was called porta in Latin, which means the door. By the way, the word port comes from the same, basically porta. The port is the door into the city. Again, remember Shkurin's theory. So the port is the door into the continent, where you arrive, the civilization arrives from the sea and goes up through the rivers into the continent. So the port is the door through which you enter the continent. So the whole elite class of Constantinople was literally called porta by, I don't know if such a word exists in English. It's like a artistic technique. It's called metonymia. It's a Greek word when you basically it's gonna be really hard to explain. My English is not really fit for this sort of endeavor. Let's put it this way. Let's just call it that. The word porta was heavily associated with Constantinople. The door, okay? It was the door. Kind of I remember the Planescape Torment, where Sigil was called the city of doors. It's literally Constantinople, the city of doors. We have portals, by the way, the same word, porta, right? The portal, the door, to everywhere pretty much, right? Because everyone meets there. And think about the word Turkey, right? What does it mean? Well, the German word Tur means the door. So Turkey is the land of doors. It's because of Constantinople. It's a place. It's the door to everywhere pretty much, right? Because everyone meets there and trades there. So yeah. Anyway, again, I promised to you a little Ottoman rant. So Ottoman Empire is a garbage bullshit fake term, okay? Invented by garbage bullshit fake historians and used by the same garbage bullshit fake historians. Because again, read about how Ottoman emperors called themselves. You know how they call themselves? They call themselves, I'm a Caesar of Rome, period. Okay. Just like with Etruria, the rant that you've never heard, again, Tuscany never existed in 17th century. Just like that, Ottoman Empire never existed. It was, the term was invented by French diplomats in 18th century to basically deny the Turks any right to Western, sort of civilization, descendants. Let's put it this way. But anyway, it's propaganda term. Ottoman Empire, it's a propaganda term. It never existed. It's not a thing. Okay? The Ottoman emperors called themselves Caesars of Rome. But anyway, okay. Which kind of leads me to also touch on the question of how Roman was actually the Roman Empire. And this is a very difficult subject. Because, you know, I personally, again, I return to what I said earlier, that this is my current opinion. I currently can't shake the feeling that the Roman is kind of a franchise, you know? Kind of like McDonald's, you know, like different companies might sort of buy this franchise and call themselves McDonald's or Roman Empire, you know, like Roman something, because maybe it was sort of like a technology of governance, again, just like the church. Because again, one other rant you'll never hear, at least in this video, is that the Roman Empire coat of arms, what is it? It's a double-headed eagle, right? One head is the church, maintaining the civil side of things, like the trade, the moralistic aspect, and the other is the legions, right? We're barely talking about the legions in this video, but still, it's kind of a franchise, right? Like, you can sell it, you can colonize people with it, you can spread the civilization with it. So it looks like a franchise. So maybe that's why people call themselves Romans, even though they didn't even had anything to do with Rome. And I have a doubt, actually, that the word Roman has anything to do with Rome, considering how late Rome developed, Rome itself, compared to Constantinople, for example, which was the city much earlier because of its much better location. Again, before alum deposits in Tolfa were discovered in 1461, Rome was nothing. I mean, it was just a small city. Maybe not that small. I mean, if you look at the map of rivers, I'll probably show it to you right now if I wouldn't forget. Like, it's actually the biggest, the Tevere, the Tiber is the biggest river in the lowest half of peninsula, okay? So it wasn't that small, but it was small. Again, papacy was sitting in Siena, and Florence arguably was still more powerful than Rome, much more powerful in that time frame, in 1450s, let's say, etc., etc. But again, I'm kind of digressing. Kind of want to get closer to our topic, even though, again, all of these things are really interesting to talk about, but I still have like at least a half of my notes untouched, so let's go further. So again, I have a feeling that Roman, there is something like fishy about it, okay? But I can't really grasp it yet. So maybe it's not related to Roma, the city. That's kind of my point. But I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like, we have a whole country named Romania, you know? We have a province in the middle of Turkey called Rom, you know, the same spelling in English as, you know, the famous drink of pirates, rum. We have a bunch of people calling themselves Romani, aka gypsies, you know, and well, gypsies mean Egyptians, right? Egyptians. But yeah. So what does Roman really mean? I don't know. Like, it's still a question for me. Maybe it's a franchise, like McDonald's. Like, McDonald's started in God knows where, Alabama, and then it spreads everywhere, right? Maybe that's how Roman things spreaded previously, with the help of the second head of the Roman eagle, right? The church. Maybe, I don't know. The franchise model. I have to think about this. You think with me as well. I would gladly see your feedback in the comments. Anyway. Crescents. We actually started with crescents. Yeah. So, why are they related to Troy system of measurements, right? Well, it's easy actually. Again, we've said church manages the moralistic side of trade. We have to manage the practical side of trade, the metrology, right? The measurement system. Well, crescent comes from the carob tree, and the carob tree has this banana-shaped, again, see the screenshot if I wouldn't forget, aka crescent-shaped fruits, okay? And these fruits have a unique capability, I don't know, property is the word, is that they have a constant weight. Imagine that. I think it's 0.2 grams, but I'm not sure. But anyway, this is why the fruits of these trees were used as measures, as weight measures in the markets of the Mediterranean, and not by proxy, thus the biggest market of Constantinople as well, right? I actually have to tell you that in Russian, these fruits are sometimes called the Tsarigradskie rashki, which literally means the horns of Constantinople, okay? So the karat weight measure is derived from carob. It's the Arabic name, I think it's Arabic, maybe not, of this tree, right? And troy ounce and related terms is derived from Troy itself, the name of this area of the straits. So, yeah, so, and legendary Aeneas, or Aeneas, or whatever you pronounce it, runs from Troy, but the real Aeneas has Troy crescents, the Pius II, the Pope, right? Residing in Siena previously, before alums were discovered in Rome. He has crescents on his coat of arms. He actually probably fled from Troy. He probably was responsible for some sort of trading post, I don't know, in Constantinople, and then he got kicked out, and for his whole life he was angry at the Constantinople guys, okay? So yeah, but by the way, up until his death, he was calling for a crusade onto Constantinople, okay? Yeah, he wasn't a good guy, by the way. Not at all. Let's talk about Caesar. We just talked about the name Roman. Again, I warned you, this video is not going to be about the church a whole lot, but all the related stuff mostly. I at least gave you the brief idea of what the church was about, and we're going to discuss Christianity, Islam, and Judaism a little bit further down, so don't worry. But right now we have to figure out some related topics, like, for example, Caesar, the name Caesar. What does it mean? You would say, well, it's just a name. It doesn't have to mean anything, okay? But I'll remind you that Caesar, or Caesar, I may sometimes confuse the two because, again, I'm kind of speaking Latin and English simultaneously in this respect. Caesar, or Caesar, is a cognomen. What is a cognomen? So Roman names have usually 3 parts, sometimes more actually, sometimes there are just more names in every part. So praenomen, which is basically first name, so it's Gaius. Nomen, which is the last name, which is Julius. So it's Gaius Julius is first name and last name. And what is Caesar? It's a cognomen. And what is a cognomen? It's a nickname. It's what you're famous for, basically. It's like John Smith the Bald, you know. John is the first name, Smith is the last name, and the Bald is what you're famous for, you know. So it's Gaius Julius Caesar. So Gaius, first name, okay, no questions about it. It actually means actually the same as the word gay, honestly. Like it's like joyful, you know. And Julius is just from the fame of Julii, you know, Julii. And Kaiser, what does Kaiser mean? Because it's a nickname, it should have a meaning. It's not something that his parents gave him, right? So there are some bullshit explanations. Let's actually talk about bullshit explanations later. Let me firstly give you my explanation, aka Tamansky's explanation, that Kaiser actually comes from the word kassa, which means basically the box with money, you know. There is actually the Russian word kazna to this day, which sounds kind of the same, you know. Kaiser, kazna, you know. And the word cash, by the way, has the same root. So Kaiser, or Caesar, is just a cashier, you know, the treasurer, aka someone who pays. And pays to whom, you might ask? Well, there is actually a Russian saying, "Кто девушку платит, тот ее и танцует," meaning, who pays for the girl. The guy who pays for the girl is the one who dances with her, you know, if you know what I mean. So, so he pays to the troops, which also means he leads them, okay? That's the idea. And this is, by the way, mirrors the word soldier, right? What is soldier? It's the one who is sold, the one who receives salary, right? The one who is being paid. By whom? By the cashier, by the treasurer. So, Kaiser is the one who pays, the one who has kassa, the cash, and the soldiers are the one who are receiving salary from the Kaiser. You see how it mirrors perfectly, right? Obviously, I mean, soldier is the English word. It kind of comes from like Spanish/Italian words, right? Like soldado or whatever, which essentially comes from the word salts, blah, 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 blah. I'm not interested in this. I'm just kind of demonstrating to you the whole idea, right? Кто девушку платит, тот ее и танцует, right? Who pays for the girl is the one who dances with her. So yeah. And that's why the most emperors called themselves Kaisers, right? It's because it's not a name, it's a title, essentially. It's a nickname, you know? Like today we have one Kaiser, you know, today we have one POTUS, you know, President of the United States. Tomorrow we have another. Today we have one Kaiser, one treasurer. Tomorrow we have another. And it's okay. It's like a position, a treasurer, you know, the guy who pays to the troops and thus leads them, right? The emperor. Imperator, it means the guy who leads the troops, literally. It was, by the way, an elective position, imperator. There was an imperator of the empire, the whole empire. Again, I'm digressing, so I'm gonna stop very soon. But there was imperator of the whole empire, you know, the second head of the double-headed eagle. But there was also imperators, like local ones. And they also had the right to платить за девушку, you know, to pay for the girl, to pay their soldiers, right? So there are Imperator Romanorum, the emperor, like the Roman emperor, and there were just imperators. So not of all the empire, but of, you know, the local legion, for example. But they also had the right to pay their troops. But anyway, that's why emperors call themselves Kaisers, is because they were paying their troops. That's it, period. It's not because of some respect to some guy who was Gaius Julius. You know, in his free time, he was a Kaiser. It's not, Kaiser is not his name. It's his position, if you wish, you know. Gaius Julius, the POTUS, you know. And this explains why we have, you know, anecdotes like this book from Suetonius, De Vita Caesarum, you know, the 12 Caesars. What do you mean the 12 Caesars? There was just one Caesar. No, there wasn't. Caesar is a position, it's a nickname. It's not a name. And again, if you read Wiki about this name, you encounter some absolute idiotic bullshit regarding elephants, right? So supposedly the word Kaiser comes from the word elephant. Again, we saw, firstly, that elephant was the symbol of Rome before papacy moved to Rome from Siena, after which it became the Capitoline wolf, aka Siena wolf. But apparently, again, the argument is that the first denarius, the silver coin that was minted under Caesar, Gaius Julius Caesar, had an elephant on it. There was an elephant and an inscription Caesar. But don't you think that when you mint money, you have to, like, you know, put a signature on it? Like, you look at the dollar right now and it says Treasurer of the United States, and there is a signature. So this is what you see on this denarius. It says, Caesar, I'm your cashier, I'm your treasurer, I'm the treasurer of the empire. This is my signature. The elephant, okay, it's a symbol of Rome, whatever. Caesar has nothing to do with the elephant. It's just the signature. I'm the treasurer. I have the right to mint this coin. Be sure of this, okay? Yeah. And by the way, kind of ending this super long rant about Caesar, I have also a doubt that basically the idea is that what if this Gaius Julius Caesar, Kaiser, is entirely fictional? And maybe, actually, you know? Because think about this. Again, you probably never heard about this, so again, good for you that you're hearing about this right now, is that the only other guy I know about who was named Gaius Julius was Gaius Julius Scaligerus. Or Scaligerus. No, Scaligerus. No, probably Scaligerus. I'm trying to figure out where the stress goes in Latin. Who is Gaius Julius Scaligerus? He is the father of basically the creator of modern chronology, aka Joseph Justus Scaliger, or Scaligerus. So, could it be, this is just my idea, that Joseph Justus Scaliger, when he was writing the history, or revising the history, let's put it this way. He put this Easter egg and sort of honored his own father, again named Gaius Julius, as one of the Caesars. Could it be the case? That would be really funny. But yeah, that's kind of my idea here. And one more idea of this sort, since we're talking about coins, and just don't. I mean, you can, I allow you to write in the comments that Mongolian nomads have minted coins, but you're not getting it from me. I guess you just did, but anyway. So let's talk about the coins. Once again, watch my video about the witches. I'm gonna link it in the description. So just think about this. And I'm probably gonna make a YouTube short about this a little bit later. So think about this for a minute. Ancient, in air quotes, quotation marks, Romans were successfully, supposedly again, mass printing on metal, aka minting coins, but they never figured out printing on paper at the same time, or parchment, or whatever they used to writing. That's very odd, don't you find? One has to assume that coin minting and the printing press would basically come together because it's literally the same technology. I mean, cosmetical differences, differences. So if anything, printing on paper is actually easier than minting coins, aka printing on metal. So why were the ancient Romans minting coins for hundreds of years, supposedly again, in fake history, and never figured out how to print on paper? That's really stupid, don't you find it? Like, they build amazing aqueducts, they build amazing XYZ, but they never figured out how to transfer their perfect knowledge in print on metal to print on paper. Interesting, right? What a bunch of bullshit. Okay, so let's return to the church finally. So, obviously, like, when I talked about how Rome was an outlier with respect to these Eastern Mediterranean patriarchies of the church, right? The Antioch, the Jerusalem, Constantinople, and Alexandria. So obviously, I think some fragmentation happened again in 15th century. Again, probably this discovery of alums in Tolfa near Rome, it may have facilitated this. Maybe the people in Italy, in modern day Italy, I mean, said, okay, we have our own thing now, okay? So maybe that's how the whole empire started, and then the church kind of said, okay, we're kind of allowing you to, so let's have two heads of the eagle right now, okay? So by the way, we talked about again, I might forget later, so I have to say it right now. So crescent is not a symbol of Islam, it's a symbol of Constantinople because of charactery, right? And the cross, the Jerusalem cross, is not a symbol of Christianity. It's just a symbol of power over four sides of the world, right? East, west, north, south. That's it, pretty much, all right? Yeah. So the cross predates Christianity just like the crescent predates Islam. Anyway, so some fragmentation in 15th century happened quite obviously. Again, at least we might suppose so. And so in early 16th century, already we see actually the appearance of Christianity and Islam finally, right? So it's early 16th century, 1520s roughly, okay? 1540s maybe even, okay? 1517 maybe actually. The Reformation, I mean, its history is also mostly fake. Maybe not mostly, a lot of it is fake because it's so political, you know? It's Anthony Fauci, you know? It's Klaus Schwab, Kim Jong-un, Putin, Ursula von der Leyen or whatever. But still, like, a lot of it is true because, you know, there's one propaganda fighting another propaganda. So at least some of it must have been true, okay? So yeah. So Christianity was used by the Protestants. Protestants were actually the first Christians in the sense that they revered Christ. Whether Christ existed or not, that's a separate story. I think actually he did. At the very least, St. Peter did, in my opinion. Again, there are some paintings, but then again, unfortunately, like, this video would be 3 times longer if I would discuss this. Maybe I have to make a part 2 or something. Maybe if you'll ask really well in the comments, we will. But anyway, so the Protestants, you know, in Germany and other northern lands, decided to secede from this Catholic, aka Mediterranean Church of the Old Testament, right? So they used this new message of this small sect within the Catholic Church of Christianity, right? So they put it on a pedestal. They said, you know, the Evangelion, like whatever's the English word, the New Testament is the thing. Screw you, the Pope. You are, you know, wrong, blah, 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 blah. So Catholics had to do something. So these tensions were super rising in early 1500s. So Catholics had to do something, and they've tried to restore their power by establishing the Council of Trent. So they've tried to intercept the Christian rhetoric, I guess. So this is where Christianity, or when rather, Christianity was canonized and dogmatized. That is 1545 to 1563, Council of Trent. So from these dates, I guess, the middle of 16th century, we can say that Christianity is established, period. Like, now it's a thing. It's a thing recognized by everyone, at least, you know, in Europe and Northern Africa and the Middle East. Though again, the wars between Catholics and Christians continued well into the 17th century. So, and the Christians won, long story short. Again, as solidified by peace treaty of Westphalia in 1648. But that's again a whole new era already. So we're not going to go there. So let's talk about, so again, Christianity, long story short, appears in 1500s. In early 1500s, actually, St. Peter was probably alive, but then he was crucified in Rome by the Pope Leo X, aka Emperor Nero. These are the same. This is the same person, basically. Anyway, let's talk about Islam. So it comes from Constantinople, as we've said, right? Not some Arabian desert. Again, Mecca, Medina, all these legends about 7th century, just forget about it. Like, find one map from 15th, 16th century that would show Mecca. Please, try to do that. You will never do that because it never existed at that time frame. Because Islam never existed at that time frame. Again, Mecca was built in like 19th century, maybe 18th at the very best. Okay. Who was Muhammad? It was Mehmed II. Okay. My opinion again. All this video is just my opinion. Mehmed II, the Kaiser of Rome, aka Ottoman Emperor in fake history books, you know. And by the way, one curious anecdote is that Alexander the Great, aka Skanderbeg, was his son from some Slavic wife / concubine. So Alexander the Great flourished roughly in 1460s to 1480s. So that's why you often find Caesar, Kaiser, and Alexander on the same woodcuts, let's say. So Caesar was colonizing, he was bringing the church, you know, remember the 2 heads of the eagle. One head is the church, another is the legions, aka emperor. So Caesar was bringing the church into Germany, into Gaul, right? Germany and France, roughly speaking, in 1450s, let's roughly put it. And Alexander was bringing the church into Egypt, Middle East, you know, places like that. Solidifying the trade with the East. Yeah. So that's why they're often compared to each other, etc. But yeah, Mehmed II, Kaiser of Rome, aka Ottoman Emperor, again in false history books, is the Prophet Muhammad, and Alexander the Great is probably his son. I'm not just saying this for the sake of hype. There is a painting of Mehmed II with some guy, very young guy, and you can only assume that this very young guy is his son, because why would the Kaiser of Rome make his own painting? I mean, not he made his, you know what I mean, okay? With some guy. it was probably his son, and he looks very Slavic. Okay, so yeah, hence the name. So Islam begins in late 15th century, again, after Mehmed II, who I think died in 1481. So, and at worst, it also begins at the same time as Christianity in early 16th century. Let's talk about Judaism. I really want to wrap this up. I'm really tired already. So Judaism is actually the most legendized of all the religions. It's the most fake. Ironically, right? Considering Maimonides is considered to be, actually the Moses, in my opinion, right? But you see, the thing is that the people of Judea in the Old Testament just means the people of the law, right? Remember how the church started, what Maimonides did. He invented the god that would oversee the trade, roughly speaking, right? He would make people not kill each other, again, roughly speaking. So, people of Judea, there's Latin word judicare or judicare, English manner. It means to judge. There is a whole era of judges in the Old Testament. Why is it called such? Because it's a era of, Judaism, like Judeas. I don't know. Again, we're using too many languages over here. So basically, people of the law, people of Judea means people that follow the commandments and would not trick you. That's what it means. It means the people of the Catholic Church, people of the Mediterranean Church, right? The traders, the civilized people. That's what people of Judea means after the revolution of Maimonides, the Moses, Like for the most part, Jews are just city dwellers. Again, civilized people in this sense. The concept of Jews as an ethnicity only appears in 19th century, actually late 19th century. That's kind of the paradox, right? It's kind of the same paradox as with Britain. Britain was the first industrialized nation, and it's still the last one, the most retarded one in terms of its, like remnant feudalism and things like that. So it's the same with Judaism. It was the first religion in the sense that it brought forth the church, the Catholic Church, but it's still the most retarded one, the most retarded religion. So yeah. So every city dweller you might call Judaic because they were following the commandments, they were trading, like we believe in Aphrodite and Bacchus and whatever, but we're trading as Moses said, like 10 commandments, we don't kill each other, like blah, blah, blah. So yeah. So this has nothing to do with Judaism as we know it today, even less so with, Jews as an ethnicity, which didn't exist back then. Again, it was invented in 19th century. So, yeah. Okay, so conclusions. The church was invented because it had to be invented to maintain the international trade in the Mediterranean in roughly 14th century. So who we know as Moses right now is actually Maimonides. And he is probably the person responsible for inventing the 10 Commandments that everyone appreciated. So the trade flourished. That's a brief history of the church. But then in the beginning of 16th century, for various reasons, let's put it this way, like a lot of power has shifted to Rome, a lot of power has shifted to Germany. So Rome fell out of the domain of the church and established its own papacy thanks to its alum deposit discovery. So it started gaining power, right, quickly. Then Germany kind of fell out. And they decided to use Christianity as their banner. Again, remember, there were no ethnicities, there were no states back then. So the only way you could have distinguished yourself from other people, from other power structures, was through religion, right? Through like some sort of general moralistic approach to the world. So that's why Germany embraced Christianity. They could have even invented it, but I'm still, my opinion again, I'm pretty sure that at the very least St. Peter existed, because I've seen some paintings which look rather convincing of this time, of like 1500 roughly, the very beginning of 16th century, where St. Peter is very old. So it means that, the crucifixion, if it ever happened around 1480s, 1470s. Where was Jerusalem is another topic. We didn't touch it here. Etruria, we didn't touch it here. church's orders, how they were doing all the work. We didn't talk about it here. While Latin America was called Latin America, well, now you have a guess why it was called such. That's why, you know, ancient Roman silver coins have the same lead isotope ratios. I keep repeating that because it's one of the biggest discoveries in history. It has the same lead isotope ratios as Bolivian silver, which only started to be mined in the middle of 16th century. Okay. So, yeah. That's why we have a whole country in the South America called Little Venice, you know, Venezuela, Small Venice, etc., etc., etc. So there's a whole lot to talk about here. But yeah, I don't even know how long this video was. Like, I completely lost the track of time right now. So could have been an hour and a half or something. Yeah, when I will review this video on YouTube, I'll probably add like 50 million new points in the comments, or maybe I won't. Maybe I will say, maybe I shouldn't even post this video. Like, again, this information is kind of destructive, but that wasn't my point. My point is that if you want Joe Biden to write your history, just read a history textbook. It's fine. I mean, keep fighting, keep killing each other. It's okay. Sarcasm, by the way. Yeah. Keep believing the bullshit version of history. Keep calling the Ottoman emperors, even though they themselves were calling themselves Kaisers of Rome, etc., etc., etc. Keep calling Etruria Tuscany, blah, 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 blah. Alright, thank you for watching. The eons are closing. If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.